Greetings, all. Welcome to Aquarian Diary. I'm your host, John Irving. It is March 29th, 2023. Spiritual glamour is a fascinating term. It has been popping into my mind so consistently lately that I knew I needed to discuss it. The concepts it embodies have been very useful in navigating my life. The territory I will explore here evokes the notion of a road less traveled, but it seems appropriate based on the astrology charts of the people I have been doing readings for lately. The truth is that the further you go down the spiritual path, the narrower it gets. Challenges become increasingly stark and acute. People fall by the wayside as they are unwilling or unable to journey with us, at least for now. We are always being tested. Lines are always being drawn. Who we are and who we are not comes into ever sharper focus and clarity. I first encountered this concept when I was in my early 20s, when I was initially introduced to the Blue Books. These are a series of esoteric publications produced by the Theosophical Society that were originally published in the late 1800s. There was a fascinating social phenomenon known as the spiritualism movement, which began around 1840. The word glamour probably conjures notions like the fashion industry, celebrities, or perhaps events like the Oscars. It definitely applies in those spheres, but has deeper meaning in a spiritual context. I often contemplate topics for a long time before addressing them here. As I contemplated this one, images of a movie or theatrical set came to mind. Superficial facades are shoddily slapped together as quickly and cheaply as possible to create desired illusions. Sets often only exist for a mere few hours before being dismantled. When we watch entertainment, we enter a state of suspended disbelief. If we did not do so, we could not engage with the drama in a moving or stimulating way. It's all being faked, and part of us knows that intellectually, yet we allow ourselves to become immersed in the narrative. We can become anxious at one moment, the next we may be moved to tears. We set aside our awareness that it's all staged so we can enjoy or be moved by the drama. Just imagining scenarios in the privacy of our own minds can produce an intense physiological response. Anyone that has felt the least bit of sexual desire can relate to this. In a spiritual context, glamour operates in much the same way. There are many beliefs, experiences, and paradigms within the wide range of human experience that, if we were to contemplate them deeply, we would find are based on nothing more than illusions. Yet most people assume they are real simply because other people or society do. This is consensus reality. I would argue that the vast majority of what people consider to be reality is actually nothing more than illusion or glamour. Humans have an innate ability, if not desire, to suspend disbelief. We are wired to do so. It takes actual concentration and discipline, rather, to not suspend disbelief. Every aspect of our perceived reality should be scrutinized to determine if it is illusory or not. This demands concentration, effort, vigilant awareness, and focus. It's much easier, on the other hand, to allow ourselves to go along with the status quo, to succumb to the tide of prevailing consensus consciousness, to remain asleep, in other words. There is a truly wonderful short book titled Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which was written by Richard Bach and published in 1970. If you have not read it, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It was seminal for me. I took a break while contemplating this topic a few days ago and stepped outside for some fresh air. In the early morning light, and against a clear blue sky, a single beautiful white seagull passed gracefully over my head. This book, which I hadn't thought about for many years, jumped back to my mind at that very moment. It's very apropos. The story is about questioning reality and taking the road less traveled. Do yourself a favor and read it if you have not. It likely explores context that is relevant to you. As social beings, we are subject to the powerful influence of collective consciousness. Switching metaphors, we move like a school of fish. One fish turns in a slight direction and the whole school moves in instinctual and unconscious unison. A fish that does not follow the school is much more vulnerable to predators. There is safety and security in numbers. It would take a lot of determination for a fish to overcome its anciently and deeply ingrained instincts. Willfully straying from the collective would be considered deviant, if not insane. Likewise, humans are wired to conform. We unconsciously adopt an understanding of reality that is defined by others. It is rare for someone to question the status quo, much less act on the product of such reflection. To do so, we must overcome a great deal of social conditioning, inertia, and fear. Society is organized to undermine, if not punish, discordant behavior or beliefs. Even if conventional wisdom is tragically and fatally flawed, which it most certainly is, the consequences of being a maverick can be severe. The Spanish Inquisition or the Salem witch trials are striking cases in point. Spiritual glamour often manifests as being extremely seductive, captivating, and alluring. It appeals to our desire for sweet, simple, and pleasing explanations to what are often actually complex moral and ethical dilemmas. Embracing illusion relieves us from stress, anxiety, and most importantly, personal responsibility or accountability. An extreme example might be a cult member who willfully assigns their free will to another who, as far as others are concerned, is clearly abusing them. Or one might subscribe to a simplistic dogmatic ideology as a means of escaping being responsible for their beliefs. In this case, some external authority theoretically assumes any blame or accountability for the veracity or failure of the chosen doctrine. Or so they mistakenly think. In truth, there is no refuge from karma. Glamour has always been a potent means by which unscrupulous individuals deceive or manipulate others for their own ends. In many traditions, it was understood to be the favored method dark forces employed to distract people from their spiritual or religious path. All manner of alluring temptations, usually primal and frequently salacious in nature, would be deployed with that aim, the goal being to corrupt the target and thus undermine or diminish their spiritual potential. Being naive, holding deep unresolved wounding, such as guilt, fear, self-recrimination, shame, or self-doubt, are typical points of vulnerability that are often exploited, as are the usual cast of base egoic afflictions such as greed, lust of power or celebrity status, pride, arrogance, and so on. Such weaknesses would be leveraged in order to prolong the stay of the victim on the wheel of karma and bind them to the lower dimensions of consciousness. Of course, the effective ingredients in this magic are actually self-inflicted, in reality, typically being self-judgment and self-condemnation, aka guilt. Those of us dedicated to the spiritual path are on a mission to find higher truth. A disproportionate part of our journey is dedicated to determining what is not true, and there is definitely no shortage of that. We make our way discarding one untruth after another. Gradually, after countless lifetimes of being on this quest, we winnow our beliefs down to a purer and purer reflection of what is actually real versus what is not. This journey can be quite lonely because there are not many that have the will, tenacity, or discipline to be ruthlessly discerning. Most prefer to lounge by the proverbial poolside and indulge in the pleasantry of acquiescence. Such mindless existence might be dull, but at least it's predictable. For many, achieving and maintaining a state of stasis would be bliss. The only constant is change, however, which stands in stark contrast to that fundamentally flawed ambition. As I said earlier, the path gets increasingly narrow. We walk a metaphorical ridge as we approach the summit. The journey becomes increasingly precarious as we continue to ascend. Should we falter, we have a long way to fall. To make a daring final ascent, we must travel very lightly. We will barely make it alone, if we make it at all, much less with others in tow. There is little tolerance here for error. Every step, every movement must be carefully measured. This is no place for illusions. No, not at all. Ironically, spiritual glamour is actually quite trivial to discern. It always contains obvious flaws, contradictions or hypocrisies, logical fallacies, is rooted in ego gratification, demands the relinquishment of agency, responsibility, or critical thinking, employs lies, half-truths, deception, or manipulation, or requires that we suspend disbelief. If we are paying close attention, it also just never feels quite right. In astrology, I associate glamour with the lower expression of the planet Neptune. Recent history is characterized by grand themes of illusion and mass delusion. Vast numbers of people have fallen under the spell of propaganda, patently absurd conspiracy theories, false prophets, willful ignorance, and pathological liars. Critical thinking is preciously rare. The threats of these afflictions are literally existential to life on our planet. We therefore discount the dangers of illusions at our peril. Glamour dominates and defines our current consensus reality. It is also the most common and substantial obstacle for the spiritual seeker, whether beginner or advanced. Despite the immense gravity of mass consciousness that is steeped in it, everyone on the spiritual path will have to master and overcome illusions eventually. The alternative is to embrace ignorance and darkness. The contrast is stark. I encourage you to maintain vigilance around illusions. Recognize the role that they play in distorting our consciousness and refrain from endorsing or promoting them. Oppose the mindless ignorance and darkness that seeks to enslave humanity. People who sit on the fence present no threat whatsoever to the status quo, to the darkness. Thus they are effectively endorsing it. I personally do not support or endorse illusions, tacitly or otherwise, nor will I be acquiescent. Being solemnly committed to the path of light, I have only one option, one true path to pursue, one way of being. I ask you to also be consciously and deliberately aligned with a similar intent. Set your divine will in motion. Declare your intentions. State them out loud during your spiritual practice. Proclaim that it is your divine right to not be manipulated or interfered with, and that doing so is a breach of your free will. Ask for any protection or guidance you may require. Recognize that you are a divine aspect of creation worthy of respect and consideration. Your existence is in no way either accidental or trivial. Claim your inherent power and do not fear exercising it. It is yours to employ. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for all your support. Thank you to all of the amazing people I have done readings for. I will put a link in the description if you would like one yourself. I very sincerely wish you courage, concentration, determination, and that you be in a high state of awareness. Take care, all the best, and I'll talk to you again soon.